Prescott and mill worker. Although I'm a native of New Hampshire, I'm not originally from Peterborough. I was born in 1798 and grew up with my 6 siblings on our family farm up in Sanborn. The time constraints of working on the family farm and impediments to long-distance traveling did not favor courting far from home. So in 1820, when I decided to get married, I married Nancy Hannaford, who lived with her 11 siblings on their family farm in neighboring Northfield, about 7 miles from us. To further emphasize that marrying close to home, one of her brothers married one of my sisters. We got married on Thanksgiving weekend, which was not uncommon at the time. It was a relatively slack time in the farming cycle, and as a major holiday of the year, not Christmas. Family and friends were more apt to be around. The time we got married was also a time of notable change. Communities across New England that had falling streams to provide the water power were building factories and mills, spearheaded by the textile industry, but rapidly followed by other manufacturers. These mills employed relatively unskilled labor and tending the machines that did the actual manufacturing, so this combination of low labor costs and increased productivity from machinery was driving down the cost of manufactured goods. Management was also changing. Passing into history was the individual artisan owner, the blacksmith, the wheelwright, the cabinet maker, the carriage maker, the printer, the miller, or the chandler, working alongside a partner or with a couple of apprentices who probably lived in their own home, almost in a family relationship. In order to build and equip these mills, took a lot more capital than a single proprietor might be able or willing to provide. So now we had multiple investors who maybe not even lived locally, had no personal relationship with the work staff, and the major concern was that their investment returned some dividends. The upshot of all this was that rural types like Nancy and I could relocate to these urban or village centers, take a job in a mill, be paid cash wages with which we could buy these now ever cheaper manufacturing goods, and no longer be so dependent on what we could raise or make on the farm or barter with farm produce to obtain. As newlyweds, Nancy and I answered the call, and we moved to Franklin, where I took a job in the mill, and we began our family with the birth of the first 2 of our 6 children. Well, about the same time Nancy and I went to Franklin, her parents also left their family farm and moved to a little town in southwestern New Hampshire called Peterborough, where a local businessman, Samuel Smith, and all his fellow proprietors had just incorporated the Phoenix cotton spinning and paper mill on a piece of property he owned, now occupied by the townhouse, the Mananock Center, the dentist office, the PO, and the Finley building, extending all the way from Main Street over to the banks of Goose Brook, which I think you now call the New Minnesota River. Anyway, Nancy and I stayed up in Franklin for about 12 years, and around 1833, Nancy and the 2 children moved down to Peterborough, and staying with her parents, Augustus, our oldest son, took a job in the mill as an overseer, supervising women 2 or 3 times his own age. He was about 11. He started at 33 cents a day, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and was making more money than the women.
They were complaining about that earlier.
That may sound like a paltry wage, but in 1830s prices, 33 cents would buy 2 or 3 dozen eggs, a couple of pounds of butter or sugar, 3 or 4 pounds of bacon or ham, or 4 gallons of beer. About 8 months later, I came down and joined the rest of the family, and I too took a job in the Phoenix mill as first an overseer, then a watchman. I started at 52 cents a day. We lived in that little cottage behind the Mananock Center, which we rented from the mill at $5 a day, or $5 a month. At the time, it was situated over on the banks of Goose Brook. Goose Brook was not the most dependable water supply. When water levels were low or it was frozen up, the mill had to shut down, and the workers were furloughed with no work and no income. Same was true of the orders in the factory. Perhaps as a consequence, Augustus worked there until he was 15, and then he went to the Lowell Mills in Lowell, Mass for higher wages and more dependable work. Nancy and I stayed in Peterborough until 1839, and we too went to Lowell. Ultimately, we returned to Peterborough to a house here on Concord Street, and I died in 1866, the year after the Civil War concluded. Nancy outlived me by another 9 years, supporting herself, running a boarding house, and weaving rugs. An article at the time reported she completed her 100th rug in her 75th year, and that her rugs were much preferred to commercial offerings and so much in demand that she could scarcely keep up. That, by the way, is not Nancy. That's her daughter, Caroline, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know where Nancy lives. Well, thank you for coming.
Wonderful.
Thank you, John.
Good.